Welcome to the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mikowski, and I'm pleased to welcome back to the show the tattooed historian, John Heckman. John, how you been?
I am doing well, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and all the better because I get the chance to hang out with you for a little bit today.
Yeah, we're going international, right? This is an international piece. It's really cold here in Canada right now, and but you know we're used to snow. People are walking around in shorts. It's fine. Everything's great.
Snowshoes and shorts. It's a great combination, isn't it?
Yeah, they can pull it off. I don't know how they do it.
So it is one of the wonders of digital technology because you've been working on a project with Civil War Monitor magazine, taking a look at the year 1864. And so even though you're in Canada, you're doing a digital project on U.S. history, lots of neat intersections going on there. First, tell us a little bit about what the 1864 project is.
Well, the 1864 project really got underway because the Civil War Monitor contacted me about doing a podcast. They wanted to jump into podcasting. They've listened to my podcast. They've listened to your work, Chris, and others, and they were, I guess, excited to jump into it in 2025 and beyond. And we decided on doing the year 1864 as something a little bit different. A lot of people have focuses that are on different aspects of the Civil War or different technologies, different battles, and things like that. And we kind of came to the conclusion, we started in 2024. Let's do 1864. And I really think that's a year that's too often overlooked by some people because we get the big issues surrounding the argument of Vicksburg or Gettysburg being the turning point, and we concentrated on 1863 and Antietam in 1862, and then the war kind of shifts in a new direction. And in 1864, and I think sometimes it gets lost on some people's minds. I know your audience, they don't lose it, but the general public sometimes thinks, Gettysburg and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the end. Yeah, turning point, and it's
There
all
was an
downhill from there.
1864? What?
Yeah, exactly. And so I really got together with them and I said, I think we need to do 1864 because it's an anniversary year, and I think there's some really big issues that are coming to fruition in 1864 that we need to cover. So it was great to reach out to some friends and colleagues and say, hey, do you want to come on and do this? I think it'd be great for all of us to really hang out and talk about something different and highlight your work as well, obviously. And it really came together in a quick manner, and we started to record last summer, and I'm so happy with the way it's turned out.
You have a pretty neat lineup of guests who you've been able to kind of tap into for this. Give us a little rundown of who's who.
Yeah, a lot of them I have actually done work with previously on my brand, the Tattooed Historian. So I had a ready-made Rolodex of some friends who I haven't talked to in a while, and they have done remarkable work. I mean, episode one started off strong with Harold Holzer and talking about Lincoln's reelection woes in the summer slash early fall of 1864. And I had my good friend Cecily Zander on for the second episode to talk about the Army of Northern Virginia in 1864 and Lee's leadership during that year. And Cecily is always great, and it was good to be reunited with Cecily again for that. Episode three was Stephen Woodworth, and we were talking about a subject that I don't have much background in, which I learned a lot from the episode. We talked about Hood and the Atlanta campaign and Joe Johnston and that relationship between those two men and Jefferson Davis. And I had never really covered that topic on any of my previous work. And as I said, I didn't really have a huge background on that, a knowledge base. So I went into it thinking I'm going to learn a lot in this episode, and I really did. So, and that's been one of the keys too, Chris, is that I wanted to cover things that I knew I needed to learn and I needed to have some background on as well. I know my shortcomings as a scholar in some areas where I'm like, hey, I really need to think about this in a new way. Let's bring someone on to talk about it. And I was able to do that through this project as well. And I was very appreciative of it.
I
Episode
think that's
four.
one of I think that's one of the coolest things we get to do is like, I'm
Yeah.
curious about this. Let me find someone cool to talk to about it for a while. And it's a great way to
Mhm.
learn.
Yeah, you have to be humble in this, and you have to say, I don't know a lot about this particular thing. I need to talk with someone about this. Learn a little bit, learn the knowledge that you need to have a conversation, but really listen more than talk, which I enjoy. I don't like to have a podcast where I'm the only one talking. I love to hear people's perspectives on things. So it really worked out well, especially in that episode with Stephen Woodworth. Stephanie McCurry was in episode 4 covering the women's war. And I really wanted to highlight these different voices throughout the series and allow us to have more of an interdisciplinary look at the war. And bringing in Stephanie McCurry was one of those ways to do that. We jump back into leadership with Jennifer Murray talking about Meade and Grant in episode 5. And I've been a fan of Jennifer's for a while, and we chat about her Mead book and the research behind that, and the ongoing research that is happening and the writing and such. And I've been following her work for a while, and I'm a Mead fan, so it was a great thing to be on with her to talk about these two men who I respect in multiple ways and think about often, especially with leadership ideas and such. Episode 6 was Evan Kutzler, and we talked about the POW experience. This one hit home for me because I'm a descendant of a prisoner of war. I had an ancestor who perished at Andersonville due to scurvy, and he had done work at Andersonville and had performed research and such there. Lived not too far from there for a while, and so that episode was really something that appealed to me personally. And I think that's the other thing, Chris, is that we underscore things that we want to highlight things, I should say, that we may not know a lot about, and we want to learn with our audience. We also like to have those moments where we have that personal connection, and your audience comes to your events and listens to your podcast and watches your videos many times because they have a personal connection to an event or the Civil War or a battle, etc. And it's just the same for us too, right? We want to have that
Yeah.
personal connection to it and learn more. And I think that episode was the most personal for me, knowing that I have an ancestor who perished in that experience, as that experience of being a POW. And
Now, let me ask you, just quickly, have you had the chance to go to Andersonville and sort of walk the ground and
I
do things
never
that way?
have. It's on my bucket list. I've always wanted to go. As far as I know, no family member has ever gone to his grave,
Wow.
and I would love to be the one. I'm the last in the family, so it's me or nobody. And he fought at Gettysburg and was captured by Mosby's men in what is now West Virginia, and was sent south. I believe he was in his early 50s when he was captured. I think he was like 52 when he perished. He was a Mexican War veteran, and so he'd been through a lot, and then perished there. And then my ancestor, my direct line to him was through his daughter, I believe, who he never met. She was born 2 months before he
Oh, wow.
was captured. So, yeah, there's a lot of family history there that's still to be uncovered. And knowing that no one that I know of has ever had the money or opportunity to go see him and his final resting place, it's very important for me to go. It's on the list.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Thanks for sharing that story. That's a
Mm.
powerful, poignant story that perfectly illustrates the point you were making.
Yeah, thank you. It really shows the personal connection that we have, right? And some of the things that we long to do to give back or to respect and honor service in that way, where we want to get to their where they fought a battle or where they are now lying, and maybe understanding that no one has done that yet, and it's up to us to do that. I think that's part of our work and our journey as students of history.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, episode 7 was Amy Morrell Taylor talking about the refugee experience. So again, bringing it to another perspective that maybe we don't think about too often, and that rounded out the entire series. And we have to. I think that was a great way to end it because the refugee experience continues for years and years after that. and into the Reconstruction era. So I think that was a great way to end it, and it was a very powerful series for me to record and to edit, and I'm so appreciative to the Monitor for publishing it.
Now, and kind of going back to the refugee topic for just a moment, I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of people forget that there was a huge, massive dislocation of people because of the war, and certainly enslaved people make up the largest portion of that, but civilians driven out of their homes and off their farms too, and so I think it's neat that you highlighted a topic that had massive implications that most people don't even realize.
Yeah, it was something that attached to a lot of people, no matter their race or how much money they had or anything like that. This was a war that touched everybody in one form or another. And it really shed light on the fact that this is a war that is going to leave behind scars, not only on the battlefield, but on the farms, on the land. uh, Homes are going to be destroyed, etc. And we need to consider that into the future, especially in this era where we see, sadly, people losing their homes to fires and such. They're having a similar experience, sadly, than some of these people who lost everything during the war.
So you had mentioned Civil War Monitor. I want to give it a chance to give him some props a little bit. I think it's neat that as a traditional form of media, as a magazine, that Terry's really trying to innovate and engage with digital media in such a way. And so the podcast seems to be a neat little crossover, and you seem to be kind of a natural fit for that. What has your relationship been working with Terry so far?
Well, Terry and I have been in contact for a little over a year, and that initial meeting we had about podcasting was just to be a kind of an advisory kind of role in my own way. He wanted to talk to me about how do you get involved and what software do you use and where do you upload things. And by the end of the discussion, I was asked if I could come on and be the be the series host, and I'm like, well, I wasn't expecting that, but I will, absolutely do that if you wish. And so it was a surprise to me that I was offered to do that, and it's been a great working relationship. Terry's very easy to get along with, and he's very open minded to what we can do and what we need to do yet. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been covered or hasn't been covered in digital ways yet that I think has opportunity for a lot of us to dip our toe into and to consider in new ways. Terry's of similar mindset, and we've seen the way that the printed works have evolved over the years, and they've become more digitized. They're going to continue to become more digitized, and you're going to continue to see new ways of engaging with the printed word. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and it's something that needs to happen for the future. And Terry's all about being progressive in that mindset of what are people looking for, let's say in 2025 or 2026, and let's move in that direction. And so, with that mindset, it fit really well into my mindset of trying to digitize a lot of this research and scholarship, because I've been trying to do it for years and years. So it was good to have another ally who was like, "Yeah, I think this is cool. Let's try it."
Yeah, that's one of the things I've really admired about you and your career trajectory as the tattooed historian. You've been right on the forefront of embracing the potential of digital technology in ways to make history more accessible, to make it more engaging, to bring in new audiences. So it's really kind of neat to see you involved in this particular project because it seems like just a natural evolution of what you've been doing. But you and I both know that you and I have both run into resistance about the use of digital technology too. Tell me a little bit about that, and kind of the field's resistance to change in some respects.
Yeah, I ran into a lot of resistance before the COVID pandemic. I think that changed a lot of
Yeah,
mine.
yeah. Then
You
suddenly
know,
everyone's on the bandwagon.
suddenly everyone's like, "This is cool. I'm going to jump on this and do this." It was fun to watch because some of the people who told me in 2017 or 2018, "My audience isn't there. I don't want to be on YouTube or I don't want to be podcasting. That's not my thing." Now they're on there. Life changes sometimes, and we see that maybe we need some technology to help us out along the way. I I just saw a massive gap in the way we did history in, let's say, 2015 when I started my brand of and my project, if you will. I saw a gap there where we needed to make history more accessible, and I know that's a buzzword and a phrase people throw around, and they don't really talk about what we call like knowledge mobilization or creation, research creation, things like that. uh, you hear it in the halls of academia. You don't hear it on the battlefield at Chancellorsville or something. But I really thought that I was a kid who couldn't afford to go to conferences, and I wanted to bring that experience to people in a different way. And I was working in an archive at the time, so I was just really doing knowledge mobilization, I guess, before it was cool. And and I didn't have a budget. I still don't have a budget. I do my thing and I just enjoy it. And I think that's what really makes it really interesting, Chris, is that from my perspective, it's been authentic and it's been fun. And if it's fun for me, it's usually fun for the audience, but you still get that resistance from time to time. I've done interviews with Harold Holzer or Gary Gallagher and others, and we have a great time. And then I upload the video, and people say, well, I can't take you seriously because of what you're wearing. Like I'm wearing a t-shirt, and I get caught up with that, and I'm like, that's not the point. We're that's but you get this everywhere. You can do something you think is absolutely perfect, which I don't think anything I do is absolutely perfect, but you could think you do, and someone is going to resist and say, well, you're not a real historian, or whatever that may be. But as a trained public historian and someone who has his MA in history and is working on his PhD in digital humanities, I can assure you my student loan debt proves I'm a historian. And and I have a great time talking with people who don't quite see it the same way, because I want to understand where the disconnect is. But that disconnect has slowly gone away due to all the live streams that I did, the live streams that you did during the pandemic era where we couldn't be together. And I think that really chipped away at it, Chris. And I have you to thank for that, and I have so many others to thank for that, because we were doing what we needed to do to stay sane in a really bad time, and get that fix of history. And I think that really helped thousands and thousands of people, and that allows that resistance to what we do digitally to slowly start to dissipate. But I think that the negativity does stifle creativity.
Yeah.
I think some people are scared to start, a podcast or start a video series because they're afraid of the judgment. And I just always tell people, just go for it, and have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what digital technology has allowed so many people to do, is tap into
Mhm.
something and do something and be engaged in ways that they might not have been able to once upon a time. I really
Mhm.
liked your story about the T-shirt because it reminded me of all things of the 1960 presidential debate between Nixon and JFK, and people who listened to it thought Nixon won.
Mhm.
People who watched it thought like, "Oh my God, he looks terrible. He's awful," and like they got so distracted by what they saw that they weren't paying attention to some great substance, and then they fell for the substance, and weren't really necessarily paying attention to what they were saying. So it's like,
Mhm.
in your position, I would just want to tell people, like, well, turn off the damn monitor then. You can
Yeah.
listen with just the speakers on.
Yeah, yeah, when someone like Gary Gallagher takes the time to, or Harold or Holzer or anyone else takes the time to come on, and knowing I can't, I can't give any more than the time to them at that moment, because like I said, I don't have a budget, so I can't, like, be writing them a check for coming on. uh, it's that laid back kind of coffee shop talk that you're going to get, and it's I think it's a beautiful thing when it's that authentic and you're just being yourself. And I've found that a lot of people who come on and talk with me, and maybe those who talk with you as well, they like having the laid back experience instead of the prearranged questions and things like that. they never know what I'm going to ask, but I never put them in a corner. I'm usually
Yeah.
just making some larger generalities that we can chip away at as we go. And I think that authenticity really comes through for a lot of people. And if I'm wearing a t-shirt, then so be it. That's just the way I am. You'll see me in denim on denim and t-shirts and flannel all the time, and that's my style. If I try to switch it up, then I'm not being authentic, and then that's a whole other level of problems.
Right, right, right. So you had the chance to have these coffee shop conversations with some of the great minds in the field because you had questions about 1864. Now that you're at the tail end of that series of discussions, what insights have you come to?
Well, in 2019, I was on a tour with you, and you changed my mind about the turning point of the Civil War.
Oh,
I was like, "Oh, it's Gettysburg." I grew up 25 miles from
yeah,
Gettysburg. It's gotta be Gettysburg. It's gotta be this. And we were standing in the wilderness, and you said, "No, when Grant turns south, this is the turning point. This crossroads is the turning point." And ever since then, it kind of stuck in my mind. And I was like, huh, there's something here that I need to really grasp onto. And here we are 6 years later. We're finishing up the 1864 project, and I'm sold on that. Yeah, I'm a convert. Okay. I am a convert to the Chris Mikowski way of thinking on this. But I'm also really understanding that I too, in many ways, was overlooking 1864.
uh-huh.
I had fallen into that trap. And as we were going through the progression of ideas through all 7 episodes, I really saw that I need to also use these as a springboard to learn more.
Mhm.
And I had known a lot about the 1864 presidential election because of reading about Lincoln for years and things like that. But I never really, as I said, I never really considered the command relationship between Jefferson Davis and Hood or something. That command versus political relationship, because it was always Lincoln and Grant or Lincoln and Meade to me. So I I really understood my shortcomings as a scholar, and I think that's a beautiful thing that you need to embrace instead of feeling kind of unresponsive to. And it really made me think about, well, if I don't know much about 1864, what about 1865? I know about April, but what do I know about January, February, March? And what have I uh, never covered before on my own work or with other people? So it was great to be able to find the lanes that I have never really merged into before, but to also bring the people on who I would go to personally. I would send them a message if I had to, or an email. Hey, do you have a good idea about where I should go with this concept? And so that was what I really took out of this, Chris, was that I have a lot to learn. and and I think that's why I never consider myself an expert on anything. I always say that I'm a student. And some of the greatest historians I've ever met consider themselves students first. And we all know that we have something to learn. And 1864 is just a year that, uh, I just had hardly ever covered in anything I'd done. And I grew up in Chambersburg that was burned in 1864. And that was like it for me. It was the burning of Chambersburg and the presidential election. And I really, really learned a great deal during these 7 episodes, and hope that the audience will as well. And maybe find out some things where they also need to learn a little bit more about it, and try to understand it in a different way, perhaps.
Yeah. I really love that idea of approaching what we do with humility because there is always something else to learn, and that sense of discovery makes it new. A lot of people will ask me, well, "What else is there to say about the Civil War? It's 160 years old." But like if you're approaching it with a sense of discovery, there's a lot to learn and discover, and
Mhm.
and have your eyes opened about, and your preconceived notions challenged, and um, you know aside from finding it endlessly fascinating, you'll always have something to read because it's like, oh, I got to find out about this. I got to find out about that.
Yeah. Well, that spark of curiosity is what got us involved in it in the first place.
Yeah, yeah,
And the point is never to get rid of that,
yeah,
never stifle that spark. And I hope that this series is a, a way to reignite that within maybe some people, or ignite it in the first place, to think about things in a different way, or to consider how many different ways you can look at one year. And obviously, we didn't cover everything you could talk about in 1864 in 7 episodes, but it's a good overview, a good start to get the creativity going and the curiosity going. And that for me is what I've always wanted to do, Chris, is just to make people curious. And I hope that really comes through in this.
So, is there a person from the war that you appreciated better after doing this project, and you've sort of seen them in 1864
Mhm.
in action, and you're like, wow, I just have a whole new appreciation for this guy or this
Wow.
woman.
That's a very interesting question. I mean, there were so many people that we covered through this period. As I said before, I was a Meade guy, and I, growing up near Gettysburg, Meade's the man. Um, and I really got an appreciation for the relationship between Grant and Meade a little bit more through Jen Murray's talk with me. Uh, I knew there might have been some kind of headbutting along the way, or two different people who just their leadership ideas clash, or maybe their attitudes clash. I mean, we experience this in work related issues all the time, where you know you will work with this person, but you might not go out for a drink with them. And That relationship really piques my interest, and I that's why I wanted to include that in this. I mean, we talked about the Army of Northern Virginia with Cecily Zander, and I said we need to talk about these two guys who are now having to work together, especially understanding that Meade doesn't get in the papers as much as Grant does, and how did that affect Meade? What does Meade think of that, and what does Grant think of that? And we went over that, and I really appreciated Meade a little bit more in
Yeah,
this, because he's a person who will do the job and doesn't care if he gets in the papers, doesn't want to be in the papers most of the time, doesn't want to be involved in politics because he saw what happened to Joe Hooker and other people, and they're like, nope, I don't want to be involved in that. I just want to get this thing done. And I really appreciated that about him. And being a Pennsylvania guy, it's like, okay, we Keystone kids have to stick together here. Uh, but yeah, that's always intrigued me, and that really made me more curious to read more about that command relationship between those two men. So uh, the people who I'm really gravitating though towards are the unnamed people we
yeah,
talked about. The refugees, as we discussed earlier, and the men who were the prisoners of war that you know we will never really uncover all the stuff that they went through. We may go through the National Cemetery at Andersonville or other places and see their graves, but it's different when you attach a story to a name. And many of these men will never have a story attached to their name because some of it is lost. It's up to us to uncover it if we can find it. Uh, but the refugee issue is a whole separate climate, and as we said earlier, it touched so many people, so many families, and there's so many of us who don't know how bad the war affected our families, as far as what did they have to give up, what did they lose, uh, and how did they get their lives back in order. And at a time when a lot of people, you just didn't talk about your problems
yeah,
with your families, and that those stories aren't passed down in many cases. They are, they're just like, oh, our family survived, and everything was okay. But how did they survive? And I think that's something that people like Amy Morrell Taylor and others are uncovering as they move forward. And those unnamed people who sometimes uh, are lost to history, sadly, are the ones I'm thinking about just as much as I'm thinking about Meade or someone else, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and to me, that's always one of the great powers of walking in the footsteps of these guys, or these families, or these enslaved. Is it's a way to kind of bear witness and be stewards of those stories by kind of being where they were at and being in touch with those stories that way.
Yeah, that's it's huge, and it's again going back to that personal feeling you have about that moment, or about the personal connection you have with an ancestor, or that book that you just bought that made you think of things in a different way. And that's the spark that is just a beautiful thing when you can find it. But I think that we really need to consider the names we don't know, and go that direction.
So, if you could get in the hot tub time machine and go back to 1864, is there a particular event that you would want to witness, assuming that you were in safe conditions and all that stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Oh
What would you want to
wow.
do?
Oh wow. I would I would want to be. This is a good one. I've never considered this. This is why I knew you were going to give me this question
Well,
probably,
and,
and I was
and
going
again,
to
not
start
trying to
off
play
good.
gotcha, but you've spent a lot of
No,
time in
no.
1864, so
I would love to be sitting in the room when Lincoln finds out he's facing McClellan in the presidential election.
oh, that's a good one.
Like, what are his immediate thoughts, and how does he think he's going to initially step forward with this reelection, knowing that in his mind he doesn't really think there's a good chance of reelection anyway. The war's not going too well at the moment when he finds out, but we'll see. uh and understanding that it's going to be a hard fought battle on the battlefield and at the ballot box. I think that would be really interesting to me. Of course, I've always been to like political thrillers and stuff like that. So maybe that's why I'm like, I would love to be in the room when Lincoln finds out that McClellan earned the nomination of the Democratic Party, and
Yeah.
and see what he says, or his facial reaction to that.
That's a great moment, Dive. You get bonus points for that one. It's like, is Lincoln doing a fist bump, or is he like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah,
there are a variety of different reactions. So to be able to see,
yeah. Does he immediately think he's gonna lose the army vote because of McClellan? I
yeah.
mean, that to me would be intriguing to see. But I'm an old West Wing guy, so I want to be in the Oval when he gets, or wherever he is at the time. He's probably across the street, talking to people when this is going on. But when he gets the word, uh, what's his immediate thoughts, and what's his immediate reaction? Does he have a physical reaction to this? And then talk with him the next day. Did he have an interesting dream that night? Because he was known for that, and that's been passed down for the years through the years. That would be intriguing to me. I would enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. I think I'd like to be the campfire the night at the Battle of the Wilderness when Grant actually goes to his tent and he cries because he's so
Mm.
overcome by the slaughter of the battle. And I think that's the real turning point because he comes out through his little dark night of the soul there, and he has a quiet time by the fire. But the next day, he cuts those orders like we're going to keep going on. So when he gets to the intersection of the Brock Road Plank Road intersection, and he does turn on, like we already know he's going to go because he had that experience by the fire the night before, where he really kind of had to stare himself in the eyes and come to that realization.
Mhm,
And I bet that would
mhm.
have been a pretty intense thing to witness.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
so as
yeah.
your listeners, and I just made that up, um,
Hey,
I
I
didn't
would
have
love
that in
to.
mind
I
when I
love.
asked your question.
Hey, hey, based on that thing that you showed us in 2019 that changed my mind about the turning point, I'm with you as far as I would want to see the Army's reaction when the column turns that direction.
Yeah,
That'd be the thing for me. Yeah, I'm there with you. I would.
that'd be
That's
pretty.
another one.
That'd be pretty exciting. So,
Yeah.
um, so you've spent a lot of time in 1864. You're giving your listeners a lot of things to think about. Now we're heading into 1865 for the
Mhm,
160th anniversary. What do
mhm.
you hope that your podcast series has prepared people for as they now head into the last year of the war?
I hope that the 1864 project allowed people to see that the war was changing in some ways, and that the the civilian population and those involved were changing along with it. It was such a traumatic period overall. The entire thing was a traumatic, era in American history. But 1864 is kind of like that period where you still don't know which way this is going to go. And as we round out the end of the 1864 project, and we're now getting into, the 1865 mindset of things, I really hope that listeners understand the impact of 1864, the year 1864, on the future of, America at that time, and also understand that it's not over yet. That this is not a done deal. I mean, by the end, you have Lee getting into Petersburg, and it's a siege, and you're going to have that for until the end, nearly the end, and but it's still not over. There's still a lot of trauma to come. There are still new refugees that are going to come out of this. There's still people who are going to be taken prisoner of war. So some of these larger ideas that we discuss in the 1864 project are still building and are still relevant in 1865. It's still an ongoing subject, uh, and just the totality of loss and the mindset of these different leaders moving into that period of history is just really interesting to me, because they don't know it's going to be over. They can maybe feel it. I mean, Lee knows when he's backed into a corner of Petersburg, could only be a matter of time, especially after Lincoln's reelected. Now you know you're not going to get that peace deal you want. Uh, but they don't know when. And obviously 2020 vision. We have hindsight's 2020. But I really think that's important to remember, that when this series ends or ended, and we are done with 1864, quote, done with 1864, they don't know 1865 is going to be it. And a lot of these men who are going over the top for the first time at Petersburg, over those trenches, don't know when this is going to end. They can feel it, but they don't know. And I think that sense of wonder and curiosity is still there for us to consider and to acknowledge and to learn from. And that's what's important to me. Is I hope this is a springboard for people to not only look at 1864, but how does this transfer into 1865? What happens there? I think that's what I really hope for through all this. And like I said, sparking that curiosity is huge for me.
Yeah. And I think too that if we take away the inevitability of the ending, if we put
Mhm.
ourselves in the moment, well, yeah, we don't know how to, like, I think that's the power of John Bell Hood's Franklin and Nashville campaign is like, you know, why does he do that? Well, it's because he doesn't think it's over. Like they're still, they don't know what they're going to achieve, but they're still trying to achieve something, and they don't know how they'll get there. And so that ending still carries on into 1865. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, the elections happen, things look awful, but we don't know how this is going to end, and we're still holding out. So,
Mhm.
I really
Mhm.
like that perspective.
Yeah.
So, John, if people want to tune in to the 1864 project, remind us how we can get access to those episodes.
Well, you have a couple ways that you can do that. You can go to the Civil War Monitor's website, and they have a direct link right to the entire series of the 1864 project. You can also go wherever you get your podcasts from. So you can go to Apple Podcasts, you can go to Spotify, and check them out on there. They're readily available and accessible. And if you go to the Civil War Monitor's website, they also have transcripts available as well on there. So if you would like to read through the transcript, you can do that. It might make it easier for some of you, and we really appreciate the accessibility being put up on the website there. And really, it's everywhere as you find your favorite podcast. So please tune in and rate it and share it with your friends, because it's very important to get all this out to the masses. And the Civil War Monitor is really interested to see how this goes, and because if it goes well, they're going to keep staying on in the podcast game because they really want to be relevant for you in the digital sphere in different ways. And just like all of us want to be relevant in the digital sphere in various ways because we want to make everything more accessible and open for you. And that's the way that you can get in touch with the podcast series. And we greatly appreciate everyone who has tuned in or who has shared it out, because word of mouth is a wonderful thing for all of us in marketing.
Yeah. So it's definitely in line with your friction-free access to history, which is, I know, been one of your things. So as we wrap up, I know you've been personally really busy. Anything in the works for the tattooed historian?
Yeah, I have some things that I can't announce yet that are coming up in 2025, but I've been busy. I'm going to be going through the last part of my second year of my PhD studies, so the content had slowed down a little bit because I had to focus on my new role as a PhD student and a seminar leader with some undergraduate students who have been very great and terrific to be around. Uh, I'm going to be getting back into the gaming sphere a little bit, doing some historical gaming and talking about history through historical games. So look for me on that front. I'm going to be probably hopping back onto Twitch to start doing that again because I've been getting a lot of people saying we miss you on that platform, and some of my students are like, you need to be there. So we're going to be doing that again. Also, the Tattooed Historian Show podcast is going to be starting off a new season here in the new year, and look for a new season to be starting in late February, early March. Really excited about that. We're going to change our focus just a little bit and talk about those who are on the front lines of history in a new way. And I'm really, really happy with the direction that things are happening in 2025. I love to be busy, Chris, and you know that keeps me out of trouble. And I really enjoy everyone who has supported any of us who do digital work with history, because you know, rising tide lifts all boats. In my opinion, I love to collaborate. I love to be a part of the community, and I'm so appreciative of anyone who follows your work, my work, anyone else's work, because we're trying to make a difference. And the Tattoo Historian brand is going to be celebrating 10 years in September.
Wow.
And it's just amazing that it's been, you know, this kind of legacy project for that long, and I'm hoping for 10 more, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I wish you all the best, and I wish you more than 10 more. So just love what you've been doing, and so excited to have the chance to watch you keep doing it, man. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
yeah. Well, thanks for being with us today, John. I'm always glad to chat with you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it, my friend.
So I'm Chris Mikowski for the Emerging Civil War podcast. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.